Good morning, it's Stacey Ashley here. Super excited for a great session that we have today. So thank you if you're watching live, or if you're on the recording, please share your comments and thoughts in the comments. So today I'm really excited to be having a conversation with a really exceptional human, great friend and colleague of mine, Sarah Derry. And the reason I wanted to talk with Sarah is because she has real life experience of utilising coaching in a leadership capacity in so many fantastic ways, and in particular in her most recent role as the CEO of Accor Pacific, where she was responsible for an enormous organisation, a huge number of people, and found really creative ways to lead with heart and to create a culture that has won awards and been recognised as such a significant program of work and body of work that really impacts people, not just the people that worked in the organisation, but the people that in a hospitality setting, you know, all of those guests, all of the customers, stakeholders, hotel owners. So it's just an incredible story. And apart from that, Sarah is super qualified, a really lovely person, and I'm just delighted to be able to welcome her to have this conversation with me today about what it is to be the coaching leader. So welcome, Sarah. I'm just delighted to have you here with me today.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I'm excited to be here too. I'm actually coming to you from beautiful far north Queensland today.
Oh, amazing. I want your job. Okay, so I've done a little bit of an intro, but really it doesn't tell the whole story. So I would love for you to maybe just share a little bit more of your backstory and kind of maybe just some of the highlights along the way.
Thank you, Stacey. Well, I will, over a 30-something year career, I won't step you through every single day in the life of. But what I can share with you, and I often think that people have a feeling, perhaps when they're younger, that they absolutely need to know what they want to do or where they're going to be in 10 years. And what I want to share with people is that just get started. In a job, and find the things that you're passionate about and that you feel you can be exceptional at. And I was very lucky in that I arrived in Sydney after university, and I happened to land a job in a hotel with very little skills and experience. But I certainly brought, hopefully some personality and a desire to work hard and to enjoy what I was doing. So I actually worked through the operations of hotels, which was a great highlight, working in food and beverage and rooms. And I had the opportunity at a certain point in my career to either focus in a particular area, such as human resources or in the commercial space, or become a general manager. And I decided that what I was really passionate about was connecting people to their potential. That's kind of the thing that gets me out of bed every day and gets me excited. And that's when I went back and I restudied human resources and training, and I was lucky to secure a job working in HR. And that's where my HR career took off, and I worked for a number of hotel chains, international chains. I was very fortunate that I had opportunities to work globally, which what working in hotels allows you. I've worked out of New York, I've worked in China, I've worked throughout Asia, and obviously through Europe as well. So that's been a wonderful part of my career. And I got to a point also where I had my first daughter, and I'd always had a passion to have my own business. And that was sort of back in 2006, 2007. So I actually started a business at the time, consulting and doing HR work. And that's when something exceptional happened to me. Someone said to me, Sarah, could you coach this individual? And it was a food and beverage manager at a hotel in Melbourne, and it was an old boss of mine. And I thought, and of course, new business, I said yes to everything. So I said, absolutely, I can coach someone. To be honest, Stacey, I have no idea what coaching was. Not a word of a lie, I literally bought, that yellow and black book, the Dummies Guide to. Yep. I bought the Dummies Guide to Coaching. And what I was probably doing was really mentoring. And I loved it. And from that, actually, what started happening is people started asking me to do more and more coaching. And I got introduced to a short, I think it was a short program. And I read a few books, and I got really interested in the idea of actually what was coaching, and this idea of the person who asks questions and the standing back, which was not what I had up until that point in my career really learned to do. So And it was then I started really researching the idea of what being a real leadership or executive coach was. And I took myself off and did my first certificate in coaching, and then went on to get my diploma and so on over a number of years. I've been very fortunate in my career. I loved that business, operated for 10 years. I had lots of clients in all different organizations, and one of them happened to be a core. And I was lucky to, at that point at 10 years, I was looking at what's next. So at that stage, I got offered an opportunity to lead the human resources function. And I've always seen myself as a business person first, and HR was the area I was functionally responsible for. I worked with a wonderful CEO at the time who brought me right into the business. And then, 3 years ago, or more than 3 years ago now, I was lucky enough to step into the role of CEO for a core with over 400 hotels, operating lounges around the world for airlines, 21,000 incredible humans that I got to work with every day. And so that's where I've landed. I'm very passionate about people. I'm passionate about the idea of leadership with heart. And I am now really blessed. Over the last few months, I've had some time out and traveling and doing the things I'm really passionate about in terms of giving back and what can I be in service of. And so I'm also doing some coaching and providing some leadership insight and keynote speaking at the moment. So I'm very blessed, and I've had a wonderful career in hospitality, and the people and the connections within that have afforded that to me.
Yeah, amazing. And it's a great story. I've already heard a couple of things that I didn't know about you in terms of some of the areas that you had worked in. I didn't know China. What I would love to just ask you a question about, because this is the thing that I think challenges so many people, is you talked about the balance between that commercial leadership, having an area of focus, and the people. And so I would love to ask you, how does coaching perhaps help you navigate that?
It's a great question. And one of the things I can say to everyone listening, and to you as well, is, look, I'm very competitive. I really want to get great outcomes. I want to get the best commercial result. I want to deliver the best outcome for our partners and owners and stakeholders. So when you're inclined that way, you will find any technique, any tool that is going to help you achieve that. And let's be honest, everything in business is done by people. And so if you have the right people in the right jobs and you hang on to those people, then you are going to get incredible results. So, and it's that, it's so simple. And, it's like minimalism when it comes to architecture. It's so hard to get some of the simplest things right. And we often forget that just keeping it really simple, focusing on your people, making sure they are performing at their best, that they have got very clear expectations and they've got the skills and the tools, people will outperform. I absolutely believe that. And I've found that coaching, and when you lead with the heart, really means that you get exceptional results from people. So when you have that, the performance comes. So for me, it's all about what's the outcome I want and what are the tools and the techniques. And at the end of the day, you also need to know your own personal purpose and reason for being. And mine is about, as I said earlier, connecting people to their potential. That's the thing that gets me going. So how can I help someone use their strengths to be their best?
Yeah, amazing. Look, there's so much in there. I love the coaching is a tool. I think it's not an end in itself. It's just a way of achieving the things that are important, that really matter. It's doubly beneficial, I guess, in the fact that it really is focused on the people, because like I've had a lot of leadership experience, Sarah, and there gets a point in your career where you've been really great at everything that you do. And then suddenly you realize that it doesn't matter how great you are, you actually can't do everything. You don't have the capacity. You don't have the breadth of knowledge. You don't have, the particular strengths in all of the areas. And so coaching for me is sort of the great enabler of tapping into that incredible potential around you. And yes, you're supporting people to, to thrive in their strengths and that sort of thing. But it's still about what's the goal, what's important, all of those things. But, the capacity of one as a leader is pretty limiting. Capacity of many, being able to activate all those people around you so they can be operating in their strengths, they can collaborate, they can connect with each other. It just creates, almost unlimited possibility.
It does. And I think, I put it in very simple terms when I think about it, because, if you knew that if you invested in some software or artificial intelligence, if you knew that would give you a better performance or a better result or greater revenue and therefore more to your bottom line, you would do it. And the reality is that you need to make the same investment in people, because when you do that, you get that same return on investment as well. So I think, just line up, I would say, and this is what I've done many times, line up in your organization all those different investments that you're making and make sure you're doing the equivalent investment in people. Many years ago in hotels, we used to use a ratio of sort of 1% of revenue to be invested in training. And, that is not a huge amount, but it was actually great just to have that simple equation, because that was the minimum you were investing into people. So, and I think at times like this as well, it's even more important to make these sorts of investments, because we are resource poor, we're time poor, we often have less people to do things. So the more skilled and capable an individual is, the more that you're going to, get from them from a productivity point of view and certainly an outcome point of view. And they're going to feel better about it as well.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And I've noticed this a lot too. There is hesitation at the moment about investing. Maybe we'll invest in our people a little later. Well, what's the implication of that? Not just in the now, which is, maybe they're not feeling quite as loved because they're not getting that opportunity to grow. But also, what does that mean for us down the line in terms of the capability we're going to need next year and the year after and so on? And how invested are those people then going to be in our organisation? If we're not showing them that we value them, that we want them to grow, that we want them to, achieve greatness in their own particular way, then how does that serve us in terms of our commercial goals, if nothing else? And I see a lot of leaders really struggling at the moment because of all the things you said. They are resource poor. People are a little bit perhaps what I've been describing as undercooked. They're kind of getting promoted into roles or getting bigger portfolios, perhaps a little earlier than they might have in the past, because we just don't have that talent depth and pipeline. And so anything that could support them to feel more confident, more competent, more capable, more enabled is a good thing. And yet if we're holding back on that, there's clearly going to be an impact at some point.
Absolutely. And the way I look at it, and look, businesses all around the country and around the world right now, have been focused on the first half of the year. And that's what's, I think, built a little bit of hesitancy with, economic conditions and how people are feeling. But we're now on the other side of that. And, it's August next week. And my advice to organisations I'm talking at the moment is that, you've really got this window between sort of now and really November to make a difference with people. That will have a trailing effect into next year, and it'll probably get you right through until April. So if you want to have an absolutely cracking next 6 to 9 months, now's the time to invest in people. And I think the other thing that people really need to have a good think about is that these investments, if you just invest in one person in your organization to develop maybe some coaching skills or some leadership training, that will actually transfer to other people around the organization. And don't forget, if you're listening and you have an interest in coaching like I did, you are such a valuable tool for people to learn from. And again, honestly, I try not to think about it too much. Certainly in my last role, how many people were kind of looking at what you were doing and what were they learning from you, because that could actually be a little scary some days. But if you just sort of think, even if there's an audience of one, and you think about, well, if I just invested some time in them, and if I asked them some coaching questions, or if I sat and had a conversation with them, or I gave them a project to do or to work on something with me. One of the great things that I've seen work really well is a shadow, executive team, a small group of people that can shadow your executive team. And if you have a couple of your executives who are skilled in coaching and mentoring and things like that, that's a great way to learn. So I think that's how we've got to think about these investments as well, because that can last a long, long time. I mean, I studied coaching, I hate to think about, 10 years ago, maybe probably longer now, actually, probably 15 years ago at least. And I I used it this morning. I'm here in Queensland at an incredible event. It's actually the Challenge Games. It's over 1,000 school students who come together across far North Queensland to compete. Similar to the Paralympics, and this gets these young kids up to 18 on possible pathway. And we had there's an incredible Paralympic athlete here, Carly Salmon, and I was just chatting to her this morning and talking about what coaching was, and we were just chatting about, that is what she can also do with her team, is also coach them, and I might have snuck one or two coaching questions in there too. I'll help myself.
Look, absolutely. And isn't it one of those things that, and I think, I want to explore a little bit more about like what coaching actually is and those sorts of things. But I think that there's what we've got to move away from is this idea of coaching is this formal sit down, spend an hour conversation. Coaching is moments in time, a moment when you can use a coaching question to just open up a conversation and open up opportunity. It doesn't have to be big and hard and formal. It's just another way of, communicating and interacting and, really inviting people into a conversation.
Absolutely. One of the, whenever I've done any training or learning and development, the best programs have always been when I can apply it in my professional, but I can also use it in my personal life. And, so these are the sort of, when you learn some of these techniques, you can use them with your family, your friends, and so on. And you're not, and it really, what it is about great listening skills. And I think really relationships are about connection and connecting with another human. And when you are the person who asks the questions and allows the other person to have time to respond and think, who doesn't want to hang around someone like that, because you feel heard? It's hard. I can tell you that, because one of the toughest things for me learning as a coach was actually being comfortable with a little bit of silence. And we talk about it as coaches as creating the space, but that's when someone can go deep and they really think, and they sort of, you can see them, the cogs almost going as well. So, if you do that with your family, your teenagers, your friends, your partner, if you're involved in, a not-for-profit or something like that, or you're on a board, they're all great skills to have as well. So I think that's the other thing, that, anything that can transcend outside of your professional life with some great life skills is also a great thing to do.
Oh, look, absolutely. And as you know, I am a great advocate for let's put coaching skills into as many hands as we possibly can, because I actually think, it really contributes to making the world a better place. And so, yes, leaders, because they have the capacity or the potential to really have that, create that ripple effect to all the people around them. But really, I would love all of our kids to have coaching skills. I think there's just so much potential in that, as you say, to create connection, to really hold the space for someone else to think or to reflect or just to share, what's going on for them at the moment. And that feeling of being listened to is one of the most powerful things that can actually not just validate people's, being and where they are at the moment, but also it can then translate into performance. So there's a great piece of research, which I think I've shared with you once before, Sarah, from the BRISBANE Institute in the UK, and they've done this kind of longitudinal study over what are all the factors that kind of impact a positive mindset and how that translates to performance. And the most highly correlated factor in the workplace is the feeling of being listened to. Not that I agree with what you said, not that I'm even going to act on it, but the feeling of being listened to is the single thing that has the highest impact on people's positive mindset. So if you're a leader and you don't do anything else except listen more effectively and more actively to your people, it will translate into performance.
Absolutely. And I think if I can just pick up on a couple of words that you used there, one was that feeling, right? And, the listen to. That feeling, that sense of emotion is what creates connection amongst people. And when you get connection amongst teams, that's when you get incredible results, because people look out for each other. They kind of do that little bit more. They come up with better ideas and more, and innovations and those sorts of things as well. So, and people often, I'm super passionate about the idea of heart-led leadership, which is really doing things from the heart, which is, some of those things you just talked about, like the listening and the creating space and so on. Understanding your own personal purpose. And when you put that together with potential, then you get performance. It's like this really unique little equation. And I think that people often say, well, isn't that the soft stuff? This is doing things from the heart. Well, you know what? The soft stuff, that's the tough stuff. Because having a difficult conversation with someone, when someone is having some challenges at work, and just sitting there and listening and asking questions and encouraging them, that's the tough stuff. Making sure when you are setting a vision for your organization or your team that you are clear and concise, all of that is all of these sorts of skills that we talk about, what I reference as heart-led leadership. And I think coaching has a big part to play in that, because you are not the center of that conversation, or you are not what everything revolves around. You are the person who looks to others in your organization to be great, and you want them to be great, and you look for the strengths, and you put people in the right spots. And I think, when you think about, the role of a CEO, you kind of, sitting at the top of the pyramid. The way I see that is, it's that classic, turn that upside down. And I think that's where those skills of coaching that I learned along the way really made a big difference. I'm going to be honest, I have not been perfect at it. There's many times when I should have coached and I probably managed or I mentored and so on. But, and that's okay, right? Because we're all human. And I think that's what makes great organizations too, because people can see that because you're real. So I'm sure there'll be many people listening going, Sarah should have coached me at that moment, but she didn't. And, I also believe in the idea of excellence very strongly. And not being perfect, and just constantly looking, what's your best in that moment. And I guess that the thing I love about coaching is really, because it's a positive space to be in. And I think you talk about it, Stacey, is like possibilities, what are the possibilities? And I think it really does allow people to focus on their strengths. And then I think individuals can be great, teams can be great, organizations can be exceptional from that.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I think, as I said before, coaching is the great enabler. It's not the end result. It's the thing that creates the opportunity for people to come together, to collaborate, to understand each other better, because they're asking better questions. And I love what you were talking about. Heart-based leadership. I think, what we've seen, particularly as the world has really changed very dynamically over the last 5 or 6 years, is that the expectation of leaders also has really evolved significantly. And the things that were only whispered about before, like, humanity and leadership and compassion and vulnerability and those sorts of things, are now part of really robust conversations. So yes, we have all of those commercial requirements that that leaders obviously need to deliver on: clear vision and strategy and making sound decisions and great planning and, organizational structures and ad infinitum. But really, it's now being very much balanced out by that humanity in leadership. And people expect to be treated like humans, and to have a human experience, and that their leader will lead that. And I think that that's really changed what's required as a leader in a way. If you don't embrace some of this stuff, then how can you really expect to hold a leadership role in the years ahead? I just think you're going to become almost irrelevant if you don't balance out some of that commercial stuff with the human stuff. What do you think?
I think that's absolutely true. And I think, I could be in danger of sounding like that I spent, 24 hours a day coaching, but you don't take your coaching hat on and off, quite as easily as that. I think that if you want great performance, and if you are commercially focused, I go back to what I said at the beginning, you really have to have great people. And that's, every single CEO in the world will say, we need great people. We want great people. We've got the best people. And you really want those people to be very empowered. So I think it's critically important. People often talk about this idea that, I think you use the word vulnerability or developing your EQ and your self-awareness, but we don't know how to do that. And I think what I loved about coaching, I'm, at the end of the day, I'm quite a practical person as well. What I loved about the coaching, it allowed me with some techniques, questioning techniques or other tools that we use, like goal setting tools, etc., to really kind of practically tap into how to be a better leader and how to lead with greater EQ, because being told to be a certain way versus being shown how to is very different. And it's just the way that I learn and many people do learn. So one of the things I remember was around reframing questions. I don't know. I mean, it's one of those techniques that once you really get it, it really does help you with, it can be a whole team or it could just be an individual when things maybe are not going exactly as you want. And let's be honest, that happens a lot in business. You're not getting the performance or the result you need, or someone's just, haven't quite, met that standard that you want to get to. And they may be just feeling a little bit, disappointed or disheartened, or the team might be lacking that motivation. And I think reframing when, and you shared this with me early on, the idea of that above the line thinking and below the line thinking is really helpful. And when someone is below the line, and we all are, I have been, I'm sure you have, Stacey.
Absolutely.
How do you help someone get out of that? Because just saying, come on, cheer up, let's get on, keep going, is not always going to work.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And I want to go back to that in a minute, but let me just go back in time a little bit, because we've talked about, I think, some of the implications, good and bad, of maybe taking coaching and integrating it into your leadership and the opportunity it creates versus maybe not doing that, and then the potential impacts that creates when we have expectation of our leaders continuing to grow. So we need leaders more equipped, more confident, more capable to lead across all the different spaces that they're working in these days. But let's go back in time, Sarah, when you first sort of started to explore this coaching space, and you actually said that you were asked to do some coaching, and on reflection, maybe you weren't really coaching at all, you were doing something else. So just tell me a little bit about coaching and what it maybe really is.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. The person who asked me had worked with executive coaches at the time, with some of their team, and they had worked with me, and I had delivered a lot of mentoring programs for the organisation I was with, and I did also a lot of mentoring in the organisation I was working with. So when they asked me to do coaching, I just thought coach, I was thinking sports coaching, to be honest, quite frankly. And then I just sort of learned a little bit as quickly as I could. But I was probably mentoring. It was more the telling and sharing of my experience, which is a great thing to do, but it's not coaching. That's what I learned fairly quickly. And I think what I got interested in when I started using, from reading initially some of the techniques, it was when you can see someone thinking for themselves. And I started seeing people come up with their own solutions where I probably normally would have jumped in and said, oh, here's what I suggest you do, which is what a great mentor should do, or share a story so you learn from it. When I started giving the other person an opportunity to really kind of dig deep in themselves to come up with a solution, they were more accountable, number one. They used to do it in a much more timely fashion. And you would actually see people, and I love this moment in coaching when people have like this, and sometimes they literally do that, like their whole, when you see that, it's like their shoulders go back, or they go, or they look off to the side. It's these little moments. It's the aha moment that you actually see someone having. And that's them. That's not me. All I did was create the opportunity for them to dig deep in themselves. That's pretty cool. Because when they do that, they know, in 3, 4, 5 years' time, they're going to be able to continue to do that. And I think that's what coaching does. It's it's that skill that they'll always have, because they've seen that they can find the solution themselves, that they are their best resource.
Yeah, I love that. So let me just explore that. I'm just going to pop my slide up for a second, because I think this is a really important. As you said, mentoring is great, but it is different to coaching, and we use them in different opportunities. So really, really quickly, let me just share. This is a frame that I've been using with organisations for years to really help people understand that mentoring and coaching isn't one word. It's actually two different things, and we use them at different times. And so here on these two axes, we've got this focus of at the bottom giving answers and at the top asking questions. And that's one of the really key differentiators, I guess, in terms of how we can work with the people and that we're having conversations with. We either tell them what to do, or we ask a question so they can discover that for themselves. And as you said, that really helps them take ownership and accountability and come up with their ideas and that sort of thing. But the other thing is expertise. And where does the expertise lie? Is it with the leader using their domain expertise and relying on their domain expertise to lead? Or is it with the team member who is, has expertise, and we want to create an opportunity for them to grow that? Because one of the things that I find is that leaders carry this big burden of needing to know the answer to everything. And it's really hard, like being the expert of everything. And that's an enormous burden to carry. But imagine if you didn't have to be the expert at everything, but actually you could be the expert at asking the right kind of question and bring out the expertise in all the people around us. So what that means is that when we're working with our people, we have these different ways of working. So the first thing is it a mentoring moment or is it a coaching moment? Should this person maybe have the opportunity to figure this out for themselves, to find their pathway forward, rather than me making a suggestion or giving guidance and advice? So if they do know what the potential is, then we want to get them up into this kind of coaching opportunity up on the left-hand side there. Whereas mentoring is really relying on the leader's expertise. And while that can be useful when clearly the team member has no idea about how to tackle this thing or how to take it forward, mentoring's great. But then afterwards, we still need to coach them into the learning, to go, okay, so now that you've done that, what did you learn? How would you do it next time? How can you be better prepared? So there's still a coaching opportunity. But what we want to do is we want to transfer that expertise. And we want to do that by asking questions, because the leader will never be able to know the answer to everything. And why should they? Their job is to lead. It's to actually kind of remove the interference and create the space and the environment and the conditions for their people to, as you said before, to really lean into their potential, to grow and to learn in practically every conversation. So yes, we've got mentoring and coaching, but they're quite different and we use them in different scenarios. And actually, I think the coaching opportunity is really underutilized. I see much more mentoring than coaching. And actually, I see a lot of like consulting and maybe some micromanaging. Well, let's not talk about that. But really what we want to do is to create more and more coaching opportunity, because those coaching moments create growth. They create accountability. They create capability. And of course, that's what we want for our people. So asking great questions really opens up that space for people to do great work.
Absolutely. Do you know, it's actually funny. I haven't seen that slide for a while, and it reminds me, and maybe this is a good point for those who are listening or watching this back, is actually there's room for all of those things as a leader in an organization. And no matter what organization you're in, there will be moments when you have to mentor and manage and people need to go on training, but there's equally an opportunity to do coaching. And it reminds me, a good way that I've shared this with people I've worked with is, think about it along the way. In your career, you've acquired a lot of technical skills and so on. And so you're constantly building your repertoire. And this is kind of just like adding to your tool belt, the coaching, because you probably, if you haven't done a lot of coaching or you've dabbled in it, but you want to learn more about it, you probably are managing at times as you should be. You're probably mentoring at times as you should be. So it's really about adding to your tool belt. And actually, it reminds me of something I learned when I was doing my formal qualifications, which is sometimes when you are in a formal coaching scenario, you can mentor, but it's good to be able to say to the person, look, I'm just going to take my coaching hat off for a moment, and can I, share something with you that might be more, as a mentor. And that's okay too.
Yeah, great. And I think that's a really great example of, being very present in the moment, like what's actually going to support this person right now. Continuing to ask questions when people really legitimately, they don't know how to respond. They don't have the information, is just unfair. And so, yes, that may be a coaching moment. But once we've done the coaching and we've told the story or we've shared the experience or given a couple of suggestions, coaching hat back on. So, okay, where do you want to go from here? Now that you've got that new information. So we're still creating this choice, and that's part of building the accountability. Is we want people to have choice, because I might say the way that I would do something is like this. But that person may not actually feel very comfortable with that particular option. They may have another option which for them is easier, faster, still creates the great outcome. And that's the choice that they would make. And so coaching, I think, also gets away from us as leaders making lots of mini-me's. We don't want everyone to be the same, because then we don't get that diversity of thinking and, practical application and challenge and, all of that sort of thing. And coaching, I think, fosters that, that thinking space and being creative and exploring different ideas far more so than perhaps if we just stuck to mentoring.
Absolutely. So
one of the things that and we kind of have touched on this, you said you're very practical. I'm super practical as well. Like, how can I use this, and can I use it like next in the next conversation or the next meeting or that sort of thing? So going back again to kind of reflecting on when you started to explore and build your skills and that sort of thing, if you could give some tips to people on, how do you start this whole trying to bring in a little bit more of a coaching approach into your leadership, what would be some of the ideas to just get people started?
Well, the first thing I would say is keep it as simple as possible and use as few words as possible, because you can always ask follow-up questions. When I was doing my qualifications, we learned about all different types of questions, incisive questions and, reframing questions and so on. And when you're in the moment and you're just starting out, you don't want to be clunky and go, okay, right, I'll try this reframe technique. It's like everything. You've got to build a bit of confidence. So the best thing for me was two things. One was not to ask questions that start with why. Because it's interesting how when you ask a question with why, and you can probably share more about this than I can, Stacey, but how that shuts the person's thinking down. Why did you do that, or why do you think that happened? They're probably not going to be sitting there if they knew the answer to that. So the why question actually, kind of shuts people down. That was a good one because I could remember that really simply. And it forced me to ask these simpler questions like, what else can you share with me about that? And I would do it exactly like the way I've just delivered it then, just very simple, straightforward, but there was a couple of pauses in there because as I'm asking it, it gets them thinking. So, what else can you share with me about that? And
I love that. And I think
do that, like sit back, go into themselves and go, what? And then they'll go, oh, well, this also happened. And then, right, what happened then? So they're the two things I picked up straight away with coaching. So that's what I wanted to say to people listening is this doesn't have to be overly complex if you can just work on a few little techniques to start off with. And that's the creating the space, being comfortable with silence, try not to use why questions and just make really short, sharp questions. So just those three things. And I'm famous for what we call the rule of three. 3 things to remember, 3 goals, 3 things to do, because I think that's doable, simple, clear, focused, you get stuff done.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that. So avoid the why questions. Yep. Creates defense. People kind of defend their territory from there. And I think we can ask better questions. And I kind of use the analogy like a 2-year-old can ask why. We can probably ask a better question than why. So let's do that. Keep it simple. I think there's a perception in some instances that a coaching question has to be highly complicated and multi-part. Like a simple question creates clarity. And I think that's important. So I agree. What questions? How questions? those great open question starters. And I think what and how are probably most used, but you can use like which, who, where, when. But they just a simple question that starts with that. And it doesn't have a yes, no answer. We want to get them thinking. We want to get them sharing information because, when we listen rather than speak, we learn, and I think that's the other thing. So creating the space for them to do their thinking, do their sharing, I use the WAIT principle, WAIT. So why am I talking? I think is a great one to remind us that that's not the job.
Yeah.
Ask the question, listen, hold the space so that they can think, they can share, they can, explore, their thinking almost, or their ideas, because we don't, in our busy kind of world, we don't create enough space for that reflection and thinking. And there's that kind of old adage, I think, attributed to Abraham Lincoln, amongst others. If I had 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. Well, it's kind of the same in our busy world. We just get on the treadmill and we just do task, super reactive. If we thought a little bit more and explored our options a little bit more and then made really good choices, we'd probably get to the outcome quicker and more effectively. And coaching creates that opportunity.
I think so. I totally agree with that. One thought that's just occurred to me, in a way I've explained it to people, why should you invest some time in learning some coaching skills and tools and then using them? Early on in your career, you're often a team of one, or you might have a small team. And so that if you do it, you're going to get a great result, so you don't delegate. But once you start, moving up in your career, you learn pretty quickly about delegation. Everyone sends you off on a training course about how to delegate and those sorts of things. So coaching's a bit like, but we do it because we know when we delegate, then we can do more. Other people get better. Coaching's exactly the same. So if you're prepared to learn early in your career about how to delegate, maybe it's time to start putting some time aside to learn a bit about coaching, because it really is very similar to that in terms of what you'll get out of it. And that is that you'll get more time, you'll get better, people will get better around you, and then ultimately it leads to better individual, team, and your whole organisation's performance.
Absolutely. It's the whole rising tide lifts all ships, right? So
yes.
Anything you can do to create learning opportunities, growth, develop accountability, I think is a real positive. And one of the conversations that I have quite frequently, and whether it's with a CEO or even with an emerging team leader, is that you have a real responsibility to grow the people beneath you, not just because it's great for them, but until they grow, you can't grow because the gap gets too big and it's too hard to navigate. So if you want to grow as a leader, you've got to grow those people around you with you, so you can all kind of achieve your potential. But also it's about the way that you contribute to, what is the organization trying to do here? How do I contribute to that? How do we do it smarter and faster and easier or differently? Because maybe that's not the right thing. But if we don't ask the right questions, are we even going to discover that? So as a leader, there's great benefit to coaching in terms of for the people and for the organization. But personally, if I put my little self-interest hat on, coaching saves you time. It allows you to lead. So rather than doing, we're actually in the leading space. And when we're in the leading space, we are creating the future. We're not just stuck in the reactive day to day. We're actually creating space to be thoughtful and strategic and really create the future for all of us to go into. But we need to build capability consistently, and there is almost, I'm going to put my very self-interested hat on. I think, based on my experience, coaching is just, because you can do it anywhere, anytime, it's just such a great opportunity. I don't think there's anything that probably matches the opportunity that can be created at any moment in the workplace or outside the workplace, as you said earlier. And I think, if we could capitalize on that, it would. And I know there's some organizations that do amazing work in this space and they really equip their people. But there's some that, there's opportunity in front of them. This is a space that they could move into, and it can transform an organization and the people in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Incredible. So, we've talked about the opportunity, we've talked about the need, we've talked about the benefits. You've shared some great tips. Let's just recap those again. So trying to avoid the why question, asking simple questions, and doing really great listening. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that, Sarah?
I would just say, I'm not sure that there's any other tips I would give right now, because I think if I stay true to what I said earlier about the rule of three and just getting started, I think it would be just get started. I mean, even today, maybe it's just a challenge to anyone who's watching this back or listening right now, is just try a couple of coaching questions in your next conversation with someone at work. And it can be someone who reports to you, it can be a colleague, and see what response you get. I think that you will be very pleasantly surprised, and you'll probably feel quite empowered by that too, and greater confidence around, learning more about the opportunity of coaching. So I think not at the moment. I know that we've talked also about above the line thinking, below the line thinking. I think those are great things for people to think about as well, particularly in this time when, as I said earlier, that we, have, some organisations, it might be a challenging time. You might not have the resources you need, or you might just feel time poor. And, as a leader, part of your job is not to be, what I would say is toxic positive, but find a way in which you can get people to see there is a way forward. And I think that's the other thing that coaching does as well. So I really encourage you to do that. It's a nice, gentle way to move people forward inch by inch. I think when you have a coaching conversation with someone, the best ones I've found are when you kind of end it and you say, what's one small thing you're going to commit to after today? Just one little step. Yeah. And most people can do that. In fact,
and I love that.
99% of people will do that. So I think that's what I like about coaching as well. It is practical, which I've shared earlier, but you can create accountability that is actually achievable, which then you build upon. And that's where great performance comes in, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that incremental opportunity. We don't have to do it in a single day. We don't have to do it in a single conversation. It's just, what's the next step? And the next step and the next step. And the other thing I would say is when you go, yep, I'm going to try this coaching approach, is, choose someone who is going to be open to that approach, who's, does have a growth mindset, who is, going to participate in the conversation with you. I find sometimes when I'm teaching leaders to coach, that they want to take the most challenging individual in their team. And I'm like, well, that's kind of giving you a pretty hard road. So why don't you choose the person who's going to be most receptive, practice, get confident, as you said, and then you can start to have conversations more broadly with a greater, variety of people, and work your way up to those people who perhaps are going to be less receptive to this approach. But when they see the gains and benefits that other people are getting, that is sort of by osmosis creating a little bit more of an opportunity for you now to start working with them, utilising a bit more of a coaching approach.
Yeah, I agree with that, Stacey, totally.
Yeah, and the other thing I wanted to share is that we showed earlier that kind of the difference between mentoring and coaching, both great. And I think the big opportunity is in coaching because there's a whole pile of research, but in summary, what it says is the majority of leaders who believe that they are using a coaching approach are actually doing something different. And it's not because they're not trying to coach. It's actually because they don't have the range of awareness about all those different modalities that you could use. And so coaching and mentoring often get lumped into the same space. So yes, continue some coaching. Yes, continue some mentoring, but if you could add coaching into that mix and maybe change the balance, a bit less mentoring, a bit more coaching, then we're creating even more opportunity. And the good news is that it actually doesn't take a lot of learning to get some of those, foundation principles in place. And so, creating opportunity for all the leaders and all the people around them, which is, for me, that's my jam. So what I quickly wanted to share before we wrap up is, Sarah, you and I are going to be spending some time together during August delivering a great program called The Coaching Leader. And it really is all about setting people up for success in this space, really exploring what coaching is, why it matters, and how to get started. Some of those really practical approaches and frameworks that you can use in the very next conversation. So we've got some face-to-face programs, we've got an online program, and we're hoping to be able to support and develop just as many people as we can. So if it's of interest to you, the details are in the post. If you've got any questions, reach out to us. Aside from that, there are books, podcasts, people to follow. There's loads of ways that you can find out more about, what coaching really is and how you can just take that first step in your own journey to being the coaching leader. Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your experiences, your ideas around coaching and the difference that it can make in the very next conversation.
Thanks, Stacey. It's been great to chat. And to be honest, I have been reminded of a few things today as well. So I'm taking away a few lessons. So I appreciate that, like we do in any great conversation. So thanks, Stacey.
Fantastic. And bye for now, everyone.